Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Mark Wilson, founder of Mile Wealth in Irvine, California, on the show today. Mark started his career as a software developer, co-owning a company with his father. He jokes that his dad ended up firing him after realizing how much more Mark loved personal finance than software. He ended up as an intern in a financial planning firm, spending the next 20 years climbing the corporate ladder to eventually becoming partner. Despite hitting what some might consider the pinnacle of success, he ended up getting fired by the owner of the firm. He spent some time soul searching and trying to decide what to do, given that his entire identity, professionally at least, had been stripped away from him. But he ultimately decided to launch his own firm and do things his way. He's had a ton of success, growing from 0 clients to 23 ongoing, having done several dozen one-time plans in the last 2 years of business, and being on track for $180,000 in gross revenue, all despite being an introvert and not having any experience doing business development. He has an awesome story that you are not going to want to miss. We're an open book here at XY Planning Network. That's why we're giving you an inside look at our company through our Year 5 annual report. This report is your chance to learn more about Team XYPN, see what our 5th year in business looked like, and take a behind-the-scenes look at our stats, get a sneak peek of what's to come, and more. Download your copy at xyplanningnetwork.com/annual report. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/209. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Mark. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, it's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So let's give listeners a bit of an overview of you, where you're located, number of clients, when you started the practice, and then we'll dig into the details.
Yeah, I'm Mark Wilson, CFP, APA. This is my 22nd year as a financial advisor. I'm in Southern California, in Irvine, California. My firm has just hit the 2-year anniversary about 5 days ago, maybe not at this listening, but about 5 days ago. I currently have 23 going on 25 ongoing proactive clients. And I do a lot of project-based work as well. So I don't count those as on my client list, but I have several of those going as well.
About how many of those have you done?
Yeah, I'm averaging probably close to 2 a month right now. And I do both lighter versions and heavier versions of that kind of work.
Fair enough. So it sounds like probably in 2 years, you've done probably about as many project planning clients as you've worked with ongoing.
Probably more project-based work than ongoing. That's right.
Awesome. All right. We'll definitely talk about that. So 2 years in business, you said 23-ish ongoing clients. So, sounds like pretty on track for what we see for firms and our benchmarking surveys, which is awesome. So let's talk about how you got into financial planning. Was this the original career plan?
So when I was 16 years old, I was a software geek and wrote software professionally, worked with my father, and that was my first path. I got my degree in computer science, and I wrote software and knew that was my path for the rest of my life. And about 12 years in, the company I worked for actually had a 401k plan that was working with a broker, and that broker was doing what a lot of brokers do, charging too much for terrible service and terrible investment results. And so I was asked to review options. And here I am, a 26-year-old at that time. And that's first that I got jumped into the world of investments. Went to school not too far after that and went through UCI's CFP program. And I fell in love with the whole thing. Loved it more than I was really enjoying the software career. So I met one of the teachers in the program there and finished up the program. And she asked me to intern for her business. And I ended up not leaving. I was there for 20 years. It was an amazing experience. I was started as an intern, was a fund analyst, was a financial planner, director of financial planning, chief investment officer, and eventually a partner of that firm. And it was an absolute amazing experience. That makes it sound like it all happened in 1 week, but that was a 20-year.
Yeah. I mean, and even just going back to the transition, that is a really big transition to go from software engineer to financial planner. And how do you make that decision to completely pivot your life? Because we've got plenty of folks on that are listening that are not, financial planners. They're thinking about career changing in, and it's such a sunk cost, right? To feel like, I've spent all of these years developing my skills as a software programmer. Now I'm going to go do something completely different and may never use my coding skills again. How do you make that decision?
What's funny is I was working with my father. So my father and I owned the software firm together, and we had hundreds of clients around the country. And that was, I was eventually going to take over his practice and so forth. And it was really, he saw how much I enjoyed the financial planning stuff. So ultimately, I, in conversation with him, he basically kicked me out of the nest and said, you know what, you should be doing that for a living. And I don't know without his encouragement if I would have made that move. I always joke that my father fired me. And in essence, he pushed me out of the nest and moved me in that direction. But it just came from pure love of that, what planning is. And I still have that love today for what it is from. It's just, there's a new thing to learn every day. And that just suits me really well.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to even fathom, just because I guess in a way I career changed, but it was still the same industry. Like, I've always been in financial planning. And so it's hard to imagine saying like, okay, like kind of done. Let's go be a software engineer. Like this, that just seems like such a massive transition. But again, like when you're ready, you're ready. And when your dad fires you, then it works. Makes it easier.
Exactly.
How was it going from being a business owner to not? Because I think that's another transition some folks go through is, you went from business owner to intern, I guess. So how was that transition just overall psychologically for you?
Yeah, well, financially, it was a mess, making that transition, going from a firm that was established and doing well to really, kind of asking my way to be in a firm that was a small and growing RA firm. And those opportunities weren't widely available back then and probably aren't as widely available today as they should be. So I lost your question, Alan, in my head.
No, you're good. Just think about that transition from owner to intern. It reminds me of the movie The Intern. Just think of like what it's like to do that. So you said you were there 20 years. So would this have been like 99-ish?
Exactly. Yeah. 98, 99 timeframe. I made that transition. So actually, I felt like I was such a beginner in the field, and I felt like it was such a good opportunity that firm, the principal of the firm, was named in the Worth magazine list of the top advisors in the country at that time. It was just an honor to be there and to go from, I felt like I knew nothing, and I had so much to learn from the people that worked there and the entire industry that I really had never even thought twice about not having control or any of those issues.
Fair enough. So, you came into the industry right at the peak of a fun heyday. Was the firm pretty investment focused? Were they sort of caught up with that, or were they more on the planning side and not as affected by the .com bubble and boom?
Yeah, the firm is a real financial planning firm. And so worked with at that in the early years, not so much high net wealth, but with the target of targeting high net wealth folks. And we did I call it true financial planning, where we're looking at the entire picture and building portfolios that fit that client need. But it was a rough time for sure. And having diversified portfolios going into that heyday, whenever all you wanted were those top 10 stocks, and finally seeing the benefit of that as markets, the tech wreck happened, was certainly a learning experience, and learned a lot about building the right portfolio and thinking about risk and those kinds of things through that period.
So talk to me about your path there. You were there 20 years from intern to partner. And how big was the firm maybe in terms of employees when you got there?
Yeah, I was the first male employee and employee number 4.
We don't hear that very often in financial services, certainly not 20 years ago.
It was nice. It was good to be in that kind of environment. And that firm grew to be, I don't remember exactly how much was under management at that time. Firm was entirely AUM, as I think a lot of firms were and are in that period. But firm grew, I'm going to say from 25 million under management to, I think it was 450 or 500 million under management when I left.
So talk to me about just your growth there and how you sort of managed your career to become partner, because it's the dream that, that we all had. I feel like that we were told coming out of financial planning school, like go find a firm with an older principal and, work your way up and ultimately buy the firm. So how did you get to partner?
When a firm is small, so all those positions that I rattled off at the beginning, when the firm is small, we just wear all those hats. I mean, I could have mentioned, chief bottle washer and all that kind of stuff that we do at the same time. So it's maybe not as impressive as it sounds, but we, wearing a lot of hats and just doing good work. And eventually, thankfully the owner was gracious enough to pass on some of that equity to me over time. So it was a path that was, I think, well-deserved, but also, it took a long time to get there. It wasn't an overnight success by any stretch.
Yeah, for sure. So then again, you achieved the pinnacle of success. You became a partner and are no longer with that firm. So ultimately, what happened to cause that transition?
Yeah. So it was, the way I describe it is, it was great. My entire experience was great until it wasn't. Basically, without getting into the ugly details, the founder and I had some major disagreements and I was fired. And I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I'm embarrassed to say that ultimately I was making trades in the morning. I was taking client calls and in the afternoon, I was told I was no longer working there. And I was shocked, but I shouldn't have been. And like you named The Intern, a movie reference, I'll mention the Sixth Sense, where you look back and you say, gosh, I should have seen this writing on the wall the whole time. And that's where I was. I think I was, so comfortable. I knew things weren't good, specifically between me and the founder, but I was maybe too cocky to think that was going to impact me. So yeah, walked out, told I was fired. It was super shocking to me. And that was, it started a series of, I think the way I describe it is lawyers and emotions got involved from there. And that took a while to work its way through. And also, ultimately I was in a funk during those months following that. And I describe, it's almost a grieving process, not being able to be in the place that I was planned to be at the rest of my career, working with clients that I adored and working with staff that I had worked with and adored as well. It's hard not to do that anymore. And my identity was quite changed.
Yeah, I appreciate you being willing to tell that story, because listeners know by now I was fired from my last job. And it's one of those things that for a long time, it was really uncomfortable to say. And what I've learned over time, though, is that we all get fired at some point. Most of us who are entrepreneurs have been fired at least once, if not multiple times. I wish I could say that was the only time I had been fired. But, it's a reality that, we think of career paths that, I'm going to be you start as an intern, you become a junior associate, you move to senior lead, you become a partner, and then you buy the firm. And that life just rarely works out like that. Even when you end up being the golden boy on the path to partner, things change. And I don't know your personal situation, but it's also possibly a recognition that if you are the younger planner, to help sort of combat some of that arrogance, to recognize if things do feel a little off, address them. I mean, because in the end, if you're a partner, you're married to the other owners of the firm. It is very much a marriage, and quite honestly, harder to break up a business than to get divorced sometimes. And so to cultivate that relationship and pay attention to that relationship and invest in it, whether it be a business coach or basically a business marriage therapist, because it's something I never did. I just sort of ignored it and, think who knows where things would have been if I hadn't. But
yeah, where was this podcast when I was going through it? I could have used that advice myself ultimately.
So again, hey, we all have to go through it first, and then hopefully listeners can benefit from it.
That's right.
So you ultimately get fired. It is a shock. There's sort of this grieving period. What ultimately made you decide then to launch your own firm? And what was the timing sort of from date of fire to date of launch? How long was that?
Yeah. So the process from there was, so once I kind of pulled everything together, I actually had pages and pages of, what do I want to be when I grow up? So I have this full reset in my life. Do I go back to software? Do I, run a food truck? Do I go back into financial planning? And it was very clear that this was what I love doing, what I'm good at doing, and I should go back into that career. One of the things I'll mention is a fortunate position to be a partner whose main task was not growing the firm. So it was a partner that was really in the firm to help manage it, more so than getting new clients. And I think that's an unusual position. Most partners, becoming a partner becomes a sales role, I'll call it, or as well. So I was in a good position. So when I finally decided, you know what, this is what I do for a living, I went out and just started talking to local RAs. And I've been on a number of boards. I was on the board of examiners for the CFP, FPA local boards, and so forth, and had a lot of good relationships and with study group folks as well. And I went out and chatted with people about their firms in hopes that there would be a place for me, and was offered 3 different positions, and any of them would have been excellent, but I would have been in the same position I was, and maybe even worse, as far as, I think I was probably gun shy to go work for someone at that point. So I was exploring that direction and starting my own firm. My wife knew exactly what I was going to do, but it took me a while to get to the right spot. And ultimately I saw a quote, and truly was the moment where the light bulb went on. And it said, if you have a decision to make if you have to make a decision between 2 good decisions, choose the one that scares you the most. And I probably have not done that too many times. And I think the only prior time I did that, my dad kicked me out the door. And so this was that time for me to go make that decision. So that's when I finally decided. That was about a 7-month process from date of firing till the date I decided to run the firm, to start a firm.
So much good stuff there. One, I will say for those of you out there who have a partner and are on the fence, just ask them what you're going to do, because they generally already know. I love that it always takes us longer than our significant others to come to the same realization. Like, you've been talking about it for 2 years nonstop, but can you just do it? I'm sick of hearing about it.
Exactly.
But also just I love that quote on the one that scares you the most. You know, I always looked at it as, you got 3 great job offers, and you can take those, or you can start your own firm. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, you can go back to those 3 firms and get those same 3 job offers in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Those jobs offers are not going away, whether it's with those firms or others. And so I always looked at it as sort of living my plan B and living my backup plan. And failure, quote unquote, failure in this business, we always have people ask, that are fearful of starting their business, well, how many businesses fail? And I'm like, well, fail as in living under a bridge because you have no money and you're bankrupt, or failure as in, like, I had to go take a job making, $80,000 to $100,000 as an advisor. Like, well, you define failure. So anyway, I always looked at failure a little differently because this business is just so amazing and the opportunities are so huge.
Yeah. I think ultimately that, especially newer folks, if they come to me and said, hey, I was working at a firm, I went and started to build my own, it didn't work, or I didn't enjoy it, or whatever, and they're now coming back to me, I think they're a more attractive person, a more attractive hire, because they see things from different angles. So that person is more attractive 2 years in, having quote unquote failed, than they would have been just walking in the door in the first place.
It's such a great point. I love hiring people who have been entrepreneurs in their past because they see the bigger picture. I'm embarrassed at some of the things I probably said and thought as an employee who had not owned a business because you just don't see it. All you see is your lane. And so to that point, it's so valuable to me to have people that understand, even if they are in a lane and they can't see outside of that, they don't know other pieces. They know other pieces exist, even if they don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And so I will say to be a great employee, having experience being an employer or at least being a business owner is so valuable because it brings something else to the table. And the conversations I have with folks, no matter how many years of experience they have in the business, they can have 20 or 30 years of experience, but the conversations with someone 20, 30 years of experience but never been an entrepreneur versus someone 2 years that has been an entrepreneur, very different. Not good or bad, but I do lean towards hiring entrepreneurs.
Yeah, certainly not a mark against them for sure.
Yeah, that's another good point. I do hear that fear as well from folks. I'm like, well, if people see I'm entrepreneurial, they'll never hire me. I'm like, look, in the end, like we're so desperate for talent in financial planning, you don't need to worry about it. I mean, there was a post in our VIP group recently about, someone lied about having the CFP and they're still going to get hired because the market for talent, especially folks with 5 to 10 years, 20 years of experience, CFP, having started a firm, like that's a unicorn. You can't search for that. You just got to pray they end up on your doorstep. So anyway, all of that aside to say, don't be afraid of the future career impacts. I'll say that plenty of us out there love that, love hiring folks from that world.
Yeah. And I didn't have that mindset, Alan. I didn't have that mindset that it never dawned on me that I would fail this. So I was scared of it. And I was more worried that I wouldn't enjoy it than that I would fail at it. And that's just, because I've seen it happen. But that's a point that never really entered my mind, is that, well, I can still always come back. And I guess, I always thought I could go back to any, writing software if I needed to, even I haven't done it in a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. 20 years removed. You think you could go back and still write code or figure it out pretty quickly?
I still do. So I still write code every once in a while. And then I'm a lifelong learner, and under, today's world, you can, if you can't sleep, you can take a coding class in the middle of the night. So I've done that. I've taken and continued. I wouldn't say I'm as good as I was back in the day, but it's something that I think I'm well trained to be able to pick up and do that going forward if I ever had to.
Always nice to have options. And that's the other thing that I made the mistake. I have probably made this mistake in my career. Of not being all that diversified. So, it would be hard for me to get out of this industry because it's all I know. But, it is nice to have that diversity of background and experience, and don't be afraid to go learn. And whether it's coding or go sell vacuum cleaners at I was going to say Sears, but I guess that would be a bad career choice. Now, go to Lowe's, whoever sells vacuum cleaners.
Yeah.
Go learn how to sell. Go learn how to code. Those are things that the education and the thought process and the learning is so valuable long term. I will say I would have done a lot better launching AdvicePay, our tech company, if I had known how to code. I wouldn't have gotten taken by some developers that took advantage of the fact that I didn't know how to code a long time ago. But
yeah.
Anyway, okay. So switching gears. So remind me, when did you actually make the decision to launch, and when did you launch the firm ultimately?
Yeah. So June of 17 was my start date, and I joined XYPN about 2 months before then, and I'll mention that, XYPN was another area that helped me make that decision. So once I decided to start the firm, I did some research and direction there, thought about which things I was worried about the most. And XY, I'll call them the 3 C's. Compliance, I think, was a big hurdle for me since I never really was part of that community. I'd always worked as part of a team, and XY offered a community to me. And then actually custodian. So actually, when you are on your own, it's hard to get started with a custodian. And so all of those were solved and more through working with XY. So I'm thankful that helped me start that, going, instead of it being an uphill path, it was more flat path to get started.
That's awesome. So talk to me about the launch. Were you able to bring any clients from your previous firm, or were you truly just starting from scratch at that point?
Yeah, non-solicitation agreement, strict. I'm about 5 feet behind the line of solicitation. And so I'm starting with family and personal accounts, a handful of firms that were people that were ex-employees of my previous firm actually hired me. Some of my earliest hires were folks that I had worked with. Yeah. So it was nice that I could see that. And ultimately, I was doing, XY talks a lot about side gigs. And so as I was getting started, I kind of had 3 side gigs going as I was building that practice up. One person was asking me to write he was writing a consumer-driven book on financial planning. I think I did 7 chapters of his book. Another advisor needed help getting some of his software upgraded and running. And so I came in and did that on a consulting basis. So those were things that I was doing as I was, trying to build awareness of the firm and spread the word.
Very cool. So you wrote a piece of a book. Are you a writer or just figured it out?
I like writing. I don't consider myself a writer at all. So these are pretty technical articles. I've taught for 12 years, I taught this in CFP education courses, both at UC Irvine and Northwestern. And so trying to explain complex principles is something that I've enjoyed doing. And I think that's what I do for a living in some ways, is trying to help educate clients about, their path and understand the rules as well. But I taught retirement planning and employee benefits courses for years. And so writing, is a part of that, writing and teaching. So I don't think there's that different between the two, besides having someone that can correct my commas and put the semicolons in the right spot.
Okay. Yeah. And I love that ultimately we do talk a lot about side gigs. I will clarify for folks and it sounds like this is the direction you went, which is you started a business and then you had some side gigs to support the business, to support from an income standpoint. We do have folks ask, can I start my business on the side? I am not aware of anyone who has been successful doing that because, as you've seen, starting a business is a tough road. It's a tough journey. It's hard to be half in, half out on that one.
Totally. I've heard the same thing, and I've given the same advice where it's a long road. And if that side gig is taking you away from you making whatever, let's call it making $50 an hour, $150 an hour, and not building your business, that's not worth it. And you have to walk the balance there, but you have to be aware of it. So definitely making sure that you're focusing on the bigger prize and not just focusing on the next paycheck. So it's a fine balance, and something that I think I did a pretty good job at doing to ultimately build the business. Think about that first, but when there was spare time, then use that as the side gig.
So talk to me about the launch. So you launch your firm. You've done every job in a smaller firm that ultimately grew. Did you feel confident in your ability to go out and do the one thing you hadn't had to do before, which was go get clients?
Yeah. So luckily I had what I call it's like the ultimate introvert marketing plan. And that is, I have a good relationship with RAs all over this local area. So I basically had lunch with friends who ran large RIA firms, not my previous one, but every other one that was local that knew me. And because I was offering AUM type planning, full financial planning with asset management work, subscription-based planning for folks that don't have, aren't rich yet, and project-based planning, I could go to these firms who have a 2 million minimum or 1 million minimum, don't offer subscription or hourly work, and just say, hey, if you need a person on the list, me, I'll do good work, send it my direction. And so about my first year, about 80% of the incoming calls were from advisors that referred business my direction.
Wow. I built my business the same way, but that's awesome to hear. Just, again, it's the power of relationships and staying relevant to those folks and continuing to communicate with them. Because, when you do go to launch, it's nice to have them there and available for you to be able to tap into.
Yeah, I look back and I'm fortunate that I did all those volunteer things that I did over time, being on the FPA, being on the CFP Board of Examiners. Those are relationships that came really, really benefited me later on. And you're not, that friendship you have with a local competitor doesn't benefit you if you're the same type of firm, but when eventually it really benefited me. So definitely having a good relationship and good, people that know you and trust you can really turn into something valuable. At least it did for me.
So do you continue to see that being a driver for business for you, or have you found some less introverted, friendly marketing and sales funnels for yourself?
So what happens is the flywheel gets going. So as you are out there and about, and as you work with clients, that flywheel gets going. So I'd say it's more like 60-40. 40% are from ongoing client advisors sending me folks, and 60% are more from my own marketing efforts and clients referring clients. So that's where business is growing up today.
So you said the 60% that's coming from your own marketing efforts. So talk to me about what you are doing from a marketing standpoint that has been effective for you.
Yeah, and this is still a work in progress ultimately, but obviously helping people, I think ultimately, as hard as it is to do the project-based work, I can see more folks that way. And there are folks that are a great fit for that model. And so I think over the course of the last year, I've done, call it 20, 25 one-time, did what are one-time originally designed as to be one-time work. Some of those become ongoing clients as well. Those, just the more folks I can see, the more folks will talk about me, and they have a good experience. They'll refer business as well. So that's been just trying to, treat people well. If I didn't do the hourly work, I think I would have to do more of the other types of things. So I do speak. There's a local seminar series that's put on by a nonprofit, and it's mostly for seniors. And so I do speak in that about 3 or 4 times a year. And I have gotten clients out of that seminar series as well. It's not the kind that you're thinking about with the steak, the rubber chicken and the
dark room where you get the annuity in the back.
Yeah, the broker with the American flag pin on and with the $2,000 suit in the front. That's not the experience at all. But it's in senior centers and libraries, and it's actually award-winning seminar series, only put on by fiduciary advisors, which is really nice.
So it is a fiduciary advisor hosted workshop. Are there clients there, or is it primarily advisors?
The advisors are doing the education, invited to do education piece on 6 different topics, ranging from financial planning to equities to fixed income. But most of it ultimately is teaching people about fiduciary advisors. So it's almost an entire hour and a half just helping people understand how their current advisors getting paid, and trying to encourage people to move away from those and moving towards fiduciary advisors.
But they don't get paid. The big company pays them. That's clearly.
Well, and what's sad is I'll go and speak at a location. I'll go and speak next year, and the same people are in the front row, and they're with the same person that they were working with before. So, and the sad truth is, this education is, most of these people are in they're seniors, and to teach basic financial planning principles to seniors is valuable. But it's too little too late in a lot of cases. So I'd love to be having this seminar series for kids. I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. I'd love them to be going through this seminar series more than people my mom's age going through it.
Yeah. As they say, I've never had a client tell me they wish they had started later on financial planning. Like, gosh, I really could have waited. So, but I don't know if I've ever had anyone say either like, oh, this was the perfect time. It's something that we could start in high school or middle school even and just learning. So,
yeah.
So you're growing. Talk to me about the service model. So you said you have about half of your clients on ongoing. Over half of the clients that you've worked with have been the one-time plans. So for newer clients who are coming in, you have a couple different service models, one being one-time, one being ongoing, and you mentioned sort of fees and AUM. So, if I'm a new client, I come in, I sit down, I tell you I'm looking for a financial planner. How do you figure out and sort of decide which services I'm in need of and which services I'm willing to pay for, and whether or not those two are going to match up?
Yeah, so I always start with building a financial picture for folks. And in many cases, even before I sit down with them the first time, we're having that conversation about just where are they now? And I use this analogy of the red dot on that big map that you see at the mall or at the amusement park. And I need to know where you are now. So we figure out where that is. We draw a financial picture. I use some software to help with that, a program called Asset Map, and ultimately draw that picture for folks that tells me at least where they stand, what insurance they have, what incomes they have, what assets and liabilities they have. And then we can actually sit down and talk about what their goals, plans, questions, concerns are, and run through that. That, between those two, generally leads to one of the 3 service models. So is this a one-time plan for a disciplined do-it-yourselfer? Is it a quick start? Some people call it quick start. I call it on-the-fly planning, where we can just get going, do 2 hours together, charge for that time? Or does it lead to a more proactive, ongoing approach through either a subscription model or assets under management? And the models, what the client gets in those two is exactly the same. It's really how they pay for it that differs. And that one basically is how much in assets do they have that helps decide which version of those they get ultimately.
So what are the fee models? So with or without assets, like how are those fees calculated?
So for the proactive planning, subscription based is charging based on complexity, but most people run between $250 a month and $350 a month for that. For the ongoing AUM planning for folks with 600 or 700,000 and above, I charge an all-inclusive AUM fee and actually start at 60 basis points for that service. And that includes all the planning and the assets management as well.
Okay, that makes sense. So if they have, 100,000 in assets, are you charging the $250 a month plus an AUM fee, or does that cover investment management until they hit 600,000? It just switches.
Yeah, it switches. So if they're paying the $250 or $350 a month, let's say, that includes all the asset management work as well.
Makes sense. Have you had clients convert from the one-time planning relationship into an ongoing relationship? I mean, I know you only have 2 years of data, and these may crank up over time, but I'm just curious if you've seen any of those transitions yet.
So there's folks that, so once we do I call it on-demand planning, the one-time plan, my expectation was that about half of those folks would convert to full-time proactive advice. And it's been closer to about 20%. So to answer your question, about 20% of those folks get I call them financial reviews, pay for that. If they switch over at that time, I credit them half of the fee towards future asset ongoing planning work. So about 20% have converted. That's lower than I would expect and lower than I'd hope. But I think other folks will convert over time as well.
Yeah. And like I say, it just takes time. You go through the planning process. A year or two later, you look back and realize that you didn't actually implement any of the recommendations. And then you show back up for another one-time plan and get an update and you realize, you're still not going to implement. And that's sort of where that ongoing.
Yeah. One of the things that I do, because what you're describing would be the absolute torture to me, to work with a client, go through the work together, and then find out that they did none of it. And so that client is upset with themselves. They're not going to be bragging about your work at all because they're not going to admit to anyone that they didn't do anything. And they have less money in their pocket. It's just it's a terrible situation. So I tell people from the beginning that we're going to do accountability check-ins. So we do 30-minute accountability check-ins 1 month after the call, after our meeting, after the presentation, and 3 months after the presentation. And I let people know that upfront. And surprise, surprise, about 80% of the work gets done the day before each of those calls actually happens. So I've found actually all but one client are actually getting these things checked off their list, from the estate, visiting the estate attorney, to getting that, automated up in their 401k deposits, all the way through the list. And so I've been really successful at that, which is probably part of the reason why I'm not finding as many people that need the hand-holding, proactive type work. So I don't know if that's luck of the draw or what, but I think people self-select, knowing that I tell them right up front that I'll be checking in with them, making sure they're getting the work done with that understanding before we even get started.
All right. Yeah, sounds like they're actually self-selecting into the right service model for them.
Think so.
What is the deliverable? You mentioned Asset Map, which it's funny. I've just had a string of advisors on the show that are using mind mapping as part of their planning process. So what is the deliverable that you're giving your clients, either, I guess, for both one time or the ongoing relationship, if they're different, around, what they need to get done in their financial picture and that sort of thing?
Yeah, very different. So the one-time work is I present a financial review. It's between a 7 to 15 page action plan of things they need to do. That tells them, here's where you are, here's where I think you should be, here's how you get there, for whether that's insurance, estate planning, college funding, and so forth. And then we go through each of those, but it's really a customized, customized plan. It's not a pay by the pound type, press a button, it spits it out kind of plan. And the goal of that is to write it so that it's encouraging them to get the work done and very clear what their path needs to be to get the stuff done. On the proactive side, I don't do written plans at all. It's planning. And so each quarter, actually, each client gets a quarterly calendar of what we've done the last 3 quarters and what we checked off the list, but what we'll be doing the next quarter. So they get, as part of they get a quarterly commentary about what's going on in the world and the markets. They get their quarterly calendar of what's been done and what will be done looking forward. And then we just check those off. And that's customized for each person. What, they tend to go in little, there's tax return reviews tend to be around April, except for my, folks that get it done in September. And the calendars tend to be fairly similar, but they're definitely customized for each person. And then we just work through each of those as time goes on. So that's more very simple 1 to 3 page type presentations and sitting down with clients to help them with their retirement or college funding and so forth. More slow hand-holding approach.
How are you tracking what you've done over the last 3 quarters and will do over the next quarter? Do you have a systematized, scalable way of doing that?
No. So that's the simple answer. I wish I had something better. It's not, with the number of clients I have, it's manageable. It's actually probably my least favorite 2 days is going through the process of building all those out and so forth. But basically there's a sheet of paper for each client that has, what we said we were going to do. And then we just go, I use the word we because I was in a we environment for 20 years, but I go through and make sure that those things were actually done and checked off, and then list the new things that are being added to that going forward. But it's not as automated a process as it should be. And it certainly isn't scalable for 100 or 200 clients, I don't think.
Okay. Yeah, because I believe Michael had someone on his podcast that talked about they had this sort of custom Salesforce report that they could produce. And it sounded really cool. I'm trying to figure out how to do that for, smaller advisors that maybe aren't using Salesforce or tracking their information quite as rigorously in a CRM like a 500 person financial planning firm would.
Yeah. I haven't seen anything. I'm out there looking all the time at software, but I haven't seen anything that's a good fit for what I'm doing for sure. This is one of those, I think for subscription based work, a lot of people are worried about, the what have you done for me lately type thing. So this particular one, I have 3 quarters worth of what we've done for you. I have historical asset maps for everyone. So once a year we update that. So they get to see their financial picture morphing from where it was when they started with me. And now they have insurance. Now they have don't have 5 old 401ks. Now they can see their debt getting paid down and their SEP IRA growing. So those are the deliverables. What people are seeing is that where they are, the big picture of where they are, not just we earned you 4.3% this quarter on your accounts type of reporting.
Yeah, that's awesome. It'd be something to think about how to best show that, because I think showing the ongoing value of financial planning is so critical because, in the end, we know there's value. We're not always the best at showing it and showing activity and showing the things that you've done and the things that your clients have accomplished, and I like that 12-month window. I think that's awesome. So it'd be interesting to see if you find some ways to scale that or handing it off. You mentioned the worst 2 days. And so that naturally leads to the conversation of hiring. You've lived in a world you've run a big business before. You've been a partner in a big firm. You've now lived what life is like solo. How do you sort of classify the goals in the future of the company and what you're hoping to build?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from day one, my original plan was to basically grow to where I am today and a revenue standpoint, and then hire someone. So in my previous firm, I was, we enjoyed working with new advisors that came in, help mentor them, grow them into be, better than I ever was type advisors. And those people bring really great energy and different viewpoints. And, advisors that have done it a while, I tend to get stodgy in my ways about things. So that was the original plan. And now that I'm here, I'm rethinking everything and trying to really ask which of the 3 paths I'm going to take. And that was actually, I'll plug that I was part of the Your Pause program, I'll call it, which helped me think a little bit more about those directions and super valuable at helping me. And I'm still a work in progress, but I need to figure out which of those 3 paths is the right one for me. It's a work in progress right now. What surprises me is that continuing to be solo going forward isn't completely ruled out. I thought I would really dislike doing certain things in the business and that I could outsource that. I have outsourced some of the things, like I use FA bean counters for my bookkeeping and so forth, but I still, helping set up forms and do that kind of stuff. So, but I don't hate it as much as I thought I would. And I'm asking, am I trading current problems for future problems, just different problems? And am I forcing myself to grow at a higher pace than maybe I'm comfortable with by having a second employee, or questions that I'm asking right now?
It is fair that if you're going to hire someone, you've got to be committed to growing enough to getting the revenue where you need to be and being comfortable with that. One thing I never asked was, you're 2 years into the business, 23-ish ongoing clients. What is your sort of forward-looking revenue at this point for the business?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get to 180,000 in revenue. I'm pretty conservative, so I think over the next 12 months I can easily get to that number.
So that'll be 180,000 that you have earned over the next 12 months. That's basically your projections.
Projection. It'll be higher than that, but that's my low end projection.
Understood. Yeah, always better to plan on the low side. Okay, so that does provide flexibility to be able to hire in the next year. So it'll be interesting to see how you make that decision, because we find folks, to your point, that get in and they think one thing and it doesn't always end up that way. And sometimes they end up going a little bit different direction, whether they don't think they'll hire and then they do, or they think they will and they don't, or they want to grow big and they realize making a couple $100,000 and not having any team members and just outsourcing as much as I can, kind of nice. And sometimes you don't know till you find out. So
I agree. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm surprised. The biggest surprise to me is what few things I dislike. So the one thing is a succession plan. I'm only 52, but I do think there's a lot. The one thing is I was out talking to firms. I found a lot of firms that had, founders that were collecting Social Security and still had no succession plan in their RA firms. It was something that I would never want to happen with where I am today. So having a succession by just being myself or just having a virtual staff doesn't really build a long-term succession plan that I'd be most comfortable with.
So what are some of the big things that you're going to be working on over the next 12 to 24 months? I mean, you've gotten through the, oh crap, what did I do phase, which is really the path to, I'll say, to the revenue that you're at, and just through the, hey, you're now past the, I could go make a lot more money if I just took a job. So it does allow, I guess, a little bit more flexibility in some of the decisions that you make. And so, what are you thinking looking forward over the next year or two in terms of what you're going to be working on?
Yeah, the biggest thing is this last question that we had, is just figuring out the path from here. And, again, talking about the pause meeting that I was part of, that meeting connected with 16 different advisors that are in the same stage of their business or within a range of where I am here, and, working with them to help see what their paths were as well. So I have access to folks to help share what worked for them and what didn't work for them, and try to help make a decision. So in the next 12 months, I will make a decision which of my three paths for sure. And so that's the big decision. I wouldn't say that's my, going to take up 80% of my time or anything. The rest is just continuing to service and spread the word about, Mile Wealth and what we're doing here.
Awesome. So, if you look back over, the last couple of years, I guess what are some of the things that you've done, both good and bad, and mistakes you've made, but also successes that you've had that you feel like listeners, can learn from and maybe avoid some of those missteps or follow in your footsteps on some of those successes? When you look back, what are some of the things you sort of see as highlights and things worth noting over these last couple of years?
Oh, Alan, I had no missteps in the last 2 years at all.
Of course, right?
I think the biggest one is the area that, was pointed out pretty early is my lack of marketing abilities. So I actually did Nancy Blakey's sales training course, genuine sales training course, finished that, 3 months ago, something or somewhere in that range, and really working to help incorporate that to help make those sales conversations more comfortable for me and for clients. But just whether it's hers or any sales training, I think any of us can do better in that area and have more success. The one-time planning model isn't easy. If that's a good fit for them, people sign up all day long for that. It's the ongoing stuff. I think I need to do a better job at describing the value and all of that, and just working through that process. just being brilliant and isn't enough. I think that's what my cocky attitude. I'll just do the work. I'll be so brilliant, and they sign the paperwork next Thursday. It's not a good solution. So I think going without understanding that we know all about sales, or thinking we know it, I think was a mistake that I made early on. And then continuing to refine that process so it works for me, how I go through that is powerful, and something I'll continue to work on going forward.
Awesome. So, I guess in closing, sort of looking back at your last couple of years and really your career overall, if there's one thing that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self, one thing that you've learned that you wish you had known, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
Yeah. So going back to, my life plan getting changed, almost 3 years ago, and all that brought me, the one quote that comes to mind is, life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And having that in my head, especially back then when it just felt like everything was collapsing and my identity was changing, and not realizing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and actually you're going to be in a better place at the end of all this. And maybe not as long as I originally thought till I see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think is super powerful. So just telling myself that particular quote, that, life is happening, for all this stuff is happening so that I'm a better person. And at the end is something that I wish I knew even just 3 years ago.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your path and wisdom and how your firm has, grown to this level of success. And I'm excited to see that success continue. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be part of it.
We're an open book here at XY Planning Network. That's why we're giving you an inside look at our company through our Year 5 annual report. This report is your chance to learn more about Team XYPN, see what our 5th year in business looked like, and take a behind-the-scenes look at our stats, get a sneak peek of what's to come, and more. Download your copy at xyplanningnetwork.com/annual report. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.